This is whispers of a dark future in the year of Elon Musk, and everything is still terrible and awful.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well.
Not. I'm doing terrible now that the video started.
As a sort of follow-up to my video response to Andrewism on religion, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the importance of being critical when we're referring to concepts or when we hear people refer to concepts like nature, culture, or religion.
Remember, Piper, he wants you to be critical, moist critical. Be very moist critical about concepts.
I will try.
Either as part of a statement about the constitution of the world, as for instance when people attempt to draw a distinction between the various human cultures on the one side and the vastness of a single unitary nature that encompasses the whole universe, except those parts where humans have built things for some reason on the other, or as a component of an argument for some policy or action that they think we should feel compelled to agree with, as for instance when people refer to the unruliness of human nature as an argument for why we need some kind of authoritarian institution like a state or a police force to protect us from ourselves and from each other. In my video, I argued that our ideas of nature, culture, and religion are products of human history and therefore do not, strictly speaking, refer to anything necessarily universal across human cultures. Now, the categories of religion and culture, say, are enshrined in various national laws and international laws as well, and therefore they can be very useful in communicating problems and demands to powerful institutions like states and governments and the United Nations, say. But we can also easily imagine a world in which these categories were not respected at all, and yet society functions perfectly well all the same. In fact, they must have. There's a great book I'm going to recommend by Carlin Barton and Daniel Boyarin called Imagine No Religion: How Modern Abstraction Hides Ancient Reality. This book goes into a lot more detail than Before Religion by Brent Nongbury, the book I referenced in my video response to Andrewism, in the way in which religio, the root word for our modern word religion, referenced so many more limited things than our modern word religion does. The concept of religion that we have today was not only not needed for life to work in antiquity, for the vast majority of human existence, it made absolutely no sense. It grouped a whole bunch of disparate things together that were not socially considered to be linked, and yet society functioned. The Roman Empire.
Okay,
functioned.
so yeah, I mean, the question that we should ask at this point is what follows from that, right? So what follows from the fact that the root word of religion referred to something a little bit more general, or perhaps a lot more general than what our modern term religion refers to, right? And what follows from the fact that ancient peoples didn't feel the need to group all these different belief systems under the heading of religion, right? What actually follows from that? I don't think very much, right? I mean, good. So there's a root word that means something different than the word that we use now. Okay, you could probably say that for most words in the English vernacular. Who cares? What import does that have in terms of the usefulness of religion as an analytic category? I think none, right? Then we have the fact that, okay, ancient people didn't have an analytic category called religion that they grouped all of their beliefs under. And yeah, that's true, because people only started using that concept of religion in modernity when you had the development of like the social sciences that, went about coming up with generic concepts that helped you make sense of different or disparate social phenomena. But given what I just said, that's going to be the case for any concept from social science that you want, right? People in the ancient world did not go about coming up with social scientifically generic categories to group different social phenomena under. That's a practice that modern social scientists do. What follows from the fact that ancient people didn't think of it that way? I don't see that anything follows from that in terms of the analytic usefulness of the category. Ancient people didn't know that water was H2O. So what? This is just, I don't know. I mean, yeah, life went on despite the fact that they didn't have this particular concept. Okay, and life went on before people knew that water was H2O. I mean, this is just a very silly argument.
It's like, well, people came up with this generic concept, but did you know there was a time before the generic concept? And in that time, people didn't use the generic concept. Okay, but does the generic concept is it used in a way that can help us identify a phenomenon that's still very real? I feel like we're not asking the right questions here. We seem to be getting tripped
Right.
up on like etymology.
Right.
for a fairly long time. Other societies that didn't have any of these concepts functioned perfectly well. Imagine No Religion by Barton and Boyarin. Highly recommend if you've read
Did
Brent
they
Mongomery
function
before.
did they function perfectly well? Like, the ancient societies you're talking about had a lot of really bad aspects from the modern perspective, right? Like slavery, for example. Although slavery is a modern phenomenon as much as it's an ancient phenomenon. But at least in the modern period, we have this idea, oh, slavery is wrong. Not so for people like Aristotle and Plato, pretty famously. So, I mean, I don't think that that's the result of the fact they didn't have the concept of religion, but clearly it's not going to work to appeal to the virtues of past societies that didn't have the concept. Once again, I mean, I think, Being is right when he says the right question isn't being asked. The right question is, what is the analytic utility of the category of religion, right? Interestingly, if you read enough, or actually, look, if you just read some introductory material on religious studies, you will find that some people, and this is not a consensus view, by the way, but you will find that some people have tried to argue, well, because this concept, is the result of Europeans trying to subsume all this different stuff under the heading of religion. And, also it's very difficult to come up with an ideal or an idealization of the basic core features of religion. Because of those two things, we should give up the concept. Right. So, one point is that it's an artificial grouping of disparate things that don't actually go together. And, the other point is that when you do that grouping, okay, then it's hard to actually come up with any clear definition that accounts for all these different instances of the purported phenomena. Right. Okay. That's an argument. Right. What he's saying is not an argument. I mean, at the very least, it's a non sequitur argument. It's, oh, ancient people didn't have this concept, so it doesn't have utility. I mean, that's clearly stupid. In terms of the actual argument that religious studies scholars have sometimes made, it doesn't convince the majority of religious studies scholars because it's not very good. It's not a very good argument. Yes, things are hard to define, but that doesn't mean that they're impossible to define. And even if you can't come up, and I think you can define religion, but even if you couldn't come up with a sort of what they call ideal typical definition of religion, right? That doesn't mean the concept is worthless. It just means it's hard to define precisely.
Yeah.
So, that argument doesn't work. That sort of end of the argument. The other end of the argument that, oh, this is Europeans arbitrarily grouping things together. I mean, there's some truth to that, which is like, yeah, this sort of early religious studies scholarship where the concept is being applied for the first time is very much Europeans, thinking about Christianity and then trying to apply it to these other traditions. And that came with all of the, anachronism and sort of colonial mentality, that you might imagine. But that doesn't mean that a concept of religion that accounts for Christianity and ancient paganism and indigenous spiritual practices on the basis of actually understanding those phenomena is impossible. Religious studies scholarship isn't content to just sit there and arbitrarily group stuff under the heading of religion. That's why there's this history of attempts to define it to sufficiently include everything that, should plausibly be included in that category, right? So, I mean, it just seems like he read like 2 books and now like he's just failing to engage with the broader field. Like, I don't,
Yeah, I think he just read 2 books and now now he pretends to be like an expert on the subject now.
right.
And that he has some stake in the larger, like, academic field of religious studies now. I mean, I feel like you could do this with language. Like, yeah, there are plenty of human societies that existed before language, but so, like, should we not
Look,
use
life went on before, life went on in the days when we just grunted at each other. So what do we need this language for?
I mean, look, Being's not exactly in the halls of academia when Being makes those Confess videos, but at least I actually, like, attempt to have a grounding in that field and try Being's best to understand the basics and cite what I, directly from it, rather than I've read just a book and now I feel equipped to sort of make whole videos on like, well, this concept is bad. And did you know this concept is wrong because there was a time before the concept and etymologically it meant to be. That's very absurd, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I'm not a religious studies scholar. I have no academic qualifications in anything. And I think, President Sunday somehow has a political science degree, But putting that aside, yeah, so I'm not an academic, right? But what I do is I try to like go and read multiple, academic publications that give me a general overview of how people are thinking in the field and how they're applying concepts, rather than just reading two books that advance a controversial thesis and then calling it a day with really terrible arguments, by the way. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of questioning because I haven't read these two books, so I'm questioning whether or not these authors actually make an argument as silly as there was a time before people thought about the generic concept of religion and society still existed, therefore we don't need the concept. I struggle to think that actual scholars would make an argument that's stupid, but I don't know, it's possible.
There was a time before Bathrobe Man. There were societies before Bathrobe Man, and they all got along pretty well. And I think that we should go back to a time before President Bathrobe. And you said doo-doo, and doo-doo is right. President Bathrobe's got a lot of doo-doo in that bathrobe.
Religion, and you have an appetite for more. Fantastic book. Why this matters. When concepts like religion are simply assumed to be unproblematic, that they unproblematically just refer to a permanent and fixed domain of human existence that is just always there. It's just a thing that we have to deal with. Well, a concept that is considered like that can be really effective in making authoritarian, destructive, and cruel actions and policies seem absolutely necessary as solutions.
I don't know about you, but this like overuse of the word authoritarian, this sort of vague, scary
That
word,
stuff
like
is not authoritarianism.
Yeah, it's just like vague, like, oh,
If it's
authoritarian.
bad, it has to be authoritarian. Like,
Which
don't mind
know,
don't
wait,
mind
hold
the
on.
fact that authoritarianism is a particular type of like government, and there are bad things that exist outside of just the Venn diagram circle of totalitarianism, or sorry, of authoritarianism. But yeah,
There was a time before the concept of authoritarian. We used to use other concepts. I think that this is really ill-informed, this phrase. There are all
life
sorts of
got along. What
societies.
human beings existed before they used the word authoritarian? And like, I'm sure if you look at the etymology of the word authoritarian, you'll find that it means something slightly different than the modern word is used to refer to. So
I mean, look, it's one thing to say, hey, these concepts aren't primordial, they're not transhistorical, and often, sure, but like these concepts are things you have to deal with in everyday life. You do still have to deal with them, and it would be helpful if we could have terms to identify phenomena in things. Even if, say, really, yes, the dinosaurs did not have religion, but okay.
I mean, I also think that just this part of the video is like this sort of excursus he's going on now is just kind of a waste of time. Because like honestly, name me 3 influential religious studies scholars from the contemporary field that think that religion is like not socioculturally relative.
I got you.
I imagine most religious studies scholars, even if they are religious, are going to think that religion is socioculturally relative. Like these people have also read Leotard, like they know about this. Like this is not. I mean, and even further, like they've also read people like Marx or whatever, right? So like this is not something that they don't understand. So I'm not sure. Like I feel like now we're just having this like excursus to explain to everybody the Earth is round. Like yeah, okay, like and like
Look, those 3 professors you need to name, they're President Sunday, Quarantine Collective, and Hassan Piker. Those are your 3 professors.
To social problems, like, for instance, encroachment on that necessary universal aspect of human life, religion. Solutions to problems, you may be seeing where I'm going with this, that actually only appear as problems because these categories have been taken for granted. They generate the problems to which they are then figured as a solution. For example,
here, tell me this, right? Tell me this. Let's say we all give up on the concept that there's a unified thing called religion tomorrow. Is that going to make the conservative fundamentalists in the United States go away? Like, is the MAGA cult going to stop, thinking that Trump is like, has been sent by God and was protected from assassination attempts by God and that he's doing God's work? Are they going to stop using their religion as a justification for eroding the boundaries between church and state and for trampling on minority groups? Are they going to stop doing all of those things just because they now have given up this idea that there's something necessarily in common between their Christianity and like animism? Is that really going to constitute the social change that you imagine here? Like, it doesn't seem so to me.
Yeah, there's this was it he said taken for granted. I would actually would argue the opposite. Taken for granted sort of implies this lack of self-awareness and lack of direct attention being drawn to it. When that's what the opposite is happening, where you're directly naming the thing and you're directly drawing attention to it, especially when you're arguing for its defense and its maintenance and its transformation. You're doing everything but taking it for granted. In fact, you're responding to the crisis that society no longer takes it for granted, thus requiring those oppressive actions to take place. It's actually the opposite of taking it for granted.
When religion is taken to be a universal aspect of human society and psychology, without recognizing the history of how the things commonly associated with religion have been appended together over time, making space for religion might seem to be a pressing issue even for those who consider themselves radical reformers of society, even those who consider themselves to be secularists. Think of how somebody like Richard Dawkins will refer to themselves as a cultural Christian, really just a way to use the categories
Why
of
did he
culture
have
and religion.
bedhead in that one? Like, like he had bedhead in that one clip, and then like it goes back to normal. What, he just wake? Did he take a nap in between? Like, what happened there?
He woke up, he's like, I gotta talk about Richard Dawkins.
To themselves as a cultural Christian, really just a way to use the categories of culture and religion as a way to sanitize their Islamophobia.
Sort of feel at home in the Christian ethos. I feel that we are a Christian country.
Aw, Despicable Me. Looks like Gru from Despicable Me, the Minion movie. Piper, that's your favorite movie. You said Minions movie is your favorite movie. I have this on recording.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, now I definitely have it on recording. That response.
Yeah, there was no sarcasm in my voice whatsoever.
In the Christian ethos, I feel that we are a Christian country in that sense. It's true that statistically the number of people who actually believe in Christianity is going down, and I'm happy with that. But I would not be happy if, for example, we lost all our cathedrals and our beautiful parish churches. So I count myself a cultural Christian. I think it would matter if we substituted any alternative religion. That would be truly dreadful.
When we assume that religion is a universal aspect of human life, we might be fooled into also thinking that critically important aspects of human social and psychological.
That's not what Dawkins is doing, though. Like, Dawkins' argument has nothing to do with assuming that religion is a universal aspect of human life. In fact, if you go and you like listen to Dawkins talk or read his books, it's pretty evident that he thinks like, he has this sort of like secular humanist like, agenda where it's like, oh, look, we should just give up religion because it's anti-scientific bullshit, and we should just, we should all be concerned with, getting along as human beings, right? Like that's like, so clearly he's not assuming that religion is some universal aspect of human nature, right? So that's not the reason he's making this argument. The reason he's making this argument is because he thinks the barbaric hordes from the Middle East are going to, seep in through lax immigration policies and destroy the Anglican liberal culture of Britain, right? Like that's the argument he's making. He's not making an argument based on the idea of like, religion as an essential feature of the human being, right? Like that's clearly not the argument he's making. Also, by the way, the argument he's making also doesn't have to do with the analytic usefulness of the concept of religion, right? Because by the way, new atheists like Dawkins, like they were very famous for not actually taking any of the scholarly issues in terms of the phenomena of religion seriously. They just kind of, scribbled out books that said, this is all irrational BS. And they left it at that. And then they went on demonizing Muslims and, that was basically it, right? That was like the new atheist movement, at least when it came to the Four Horsemen, right? Maybe accepting Dennett, right? So, they're not like they don't care about the analytic usefulness of the concept of religion, right? What they care about is this stupid culture war that they're fighting, right? And that culture war actually has nothing to do with the assumption that religion is an analytically useful category or, religion is an essential feature of human beings, right? All it is just like this assertion that, when people are talking about Jesus and Muhammad and all that, God and all that kind of stuff, that's irrational hoodoo voodoo. And also, we need to keep the Muslim barbarians at the gates. Like that's the argument. It has nothing to do with religious studies or any of that, like anything like that.
You think if he covers this, do you think he'll have that face he makes, that like confused bewilderment face? Do you think he'll have that after he hears that? He'll have that like an obnoxious like, what? What are you talking about? And then he'll react to this. It'll be like, I don't do that. What are you talking about?
While doing that, yeah.
Logical existence are contained within it. This was in fact my major disagreement with Andrew, in that Andrew's videos seemed to be arguing that religion ought to be embraced as the place where things like ritual and spiritual practices, which can indeed in a certain key be critically important to our social and psychological well-being, take place. But I would contend that not only do these things not need the concept of religion in order to be practiced and enjoyed and made sense of, but also that perhaps many of them are only being treated as important to our well-being in the first place because religion itself has already been assumed to be so important for us, and these practices have been historically associated with religion. You see, categories.
Okay, so the argument he's making is actually much more underwhelming than he's selling it as, because the argument he's making is not that religion is bad. Like, so Andrewism, I did a video about it, but Andrewism, the video he was responding to in that other video he's talking about, it's a video by Andrewism where he makes like basically a really shitty argument for like venerating animistic religions as like the connection of indigenous people to the sanctity of the environment and all this fucking BS, which is barely distinguishable from noble savage bullshit to my mind, right? And so he basically adds his voice to the chorus of people that are trying to find a place for religion in radical left politics, right? Despite the fact that in the video he himself says that he's not religious, but and that he doesn't like supernatural stuff. But whatever, right? So President Sunday's response to that is not that, oh, the actual like institutions and modes of thought and social relations that constitute religion, those are not something that should be embraced by, radical politics, which that's partially because, by the way, I don't think President Sunday is interested in radical politics. I think he's interested in, policy wonking, voting for the Democrats, no matter who, every 4 years or whatever, and pretending to be smarter than everybody else. But, in virtue of all that stuff. But he's not making that argument. The argument he's making is, no, you can still have your good and wholesome religious practices, but you just can't call them religion because I read these 2 books once, right? That's the argument that he's making. So it's not actually as profound as like he's leading on here. It's not actually like a fundamental critique of people's ideas about religion. It's basically just saying, it's not even actually a critique of taking what is called by the name of religion for granted. It's an argument about the word. It's a semantic argument. He's basically saying, yeah, keep your religion and keep your religious practices and keep your religious modes of thought. Just don't call them religion, because that comes from the root word religio. And there was a time before the word religion was used to talk about these different phenomena. And so just don't use that word, right? It's actually very little of substance is being said, right?
Like religion. Don't simply group concepts together. They are also concepts themselves. And this is very important to understand. Concepts relate to each other spatially. This is why we talk about concepts as being separated and defined, as if they are spaces where certain things belong and other things do not. That's simply how human thought makes sense of the world. It's wrong. Stuff actually isn't divided that cleanly, and things don't actually repeat that reliably, such that we can say that there are in fact truly multiple instances of the same category in the world. But it works. At least it works well enough to both keep us alive and allow us to accomplish some pretty impressive feats. But
I mean, that's like basically just a philosophically controversial thesis about concepts. I mean, why does he think that like asserting some like philosophical thesis about concepts and then brushing by it with no argument is somehow like persuasive or making an argument or anything interesting? Like, I don't know.
Because concepts are spatial, they can encroach on each other's territory if we are not careful, and can even completely cover each other up. The concepts we use to describe the world are capable of much more than simply being wrong or misleading. They can prevent certain parts of the world or certain configurations of those parts from having any voice or visibility for how we collectively choose to live together in the world and view our place in it. The philosopher Bruno Latour, in his book Politics of Nature, which is excellent, puts the issue in a formulation that I quite like. Quote, "Thou shalt not simplify the number of propositions to be taken into account in the discussion." Unquote. You see, for Bruno Latour, he conceives of the different elements that we populate.
You like that? Like, that's an ego look when you pull down the book and you look up in the sky. You're like, oh, I'm so great. Oh, I have the knowledge. I have the power. It's like this, like, you gotta have a mega ego to do that. Did you see that? Like that little flick, takes down the book, puts up his hands, looks up at the sky. Oh, I've got to lay down some truth on your ass. Like, come on.
Yeah, this whole like thing is very pretentious. Yeah.
Sieves of the different elements that we populate our world and our imaginary with to be sort of like persons taking part in an assembly in a republic. Whether or not nature is unitary or multiple affects how many different voices can be represented by the scientists who act as the representatives of nature. Whether religion, for example, is one whole thing or actually an arbitrary grouping of many different things, depending on how it's taken in that way, more or fewer things are actually present to us for our consideration. More or less things are actually taken into our consideration when we are discussing and deliberating about what parts of society there are that demand our protections. What parts of our society are there that demand our attention? Religion is merely one way of separating out a set of human practices and inventions from the rest of society that humans have developed. We might have settled upon other configurations of practices that don't assume that ritual
Yeah, I don't.
and
Well,
morality.
yeah, conceptual frames are socially constructed. What's your point? What is the substance here? What is the argument?
Also, you
Like,
can argue
we've had a non sequitur and an appeal to etymology and a bunch of yammering about like the social construction of reality that everybody knows about, besides like people who know nothing about the humanities. Like I don't like what is the point of this? Like
I don't
what?
know.
There's no argument here. Maybe it's in his other two videos, although I doubt it. Right. Where it's like, because I think I have seen at least a portion of one of those, and doesn't seem like there was much argument there either. But there's no argument here that religion is a non-useful concept. Like nowhere in this pretentious yammering do you actually find an argument that like reliably concludes that religion is not analytically useful as a concept, right? So it's just like a bunch of like hot air.
Well, the argument here is like, well, look, people will sometimes define religion as involving rituals and morals, but those are separate things. Did you know that those can be understood separately as separate phenomena? Okay. What?
The brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, look, being has being's own definition of religion, and morality is not in there. I mean, morality is going to be a natural follow through from it. And in terms of ritual, yeah, you can have non-religious rituals. There are other animal species besides humans that's argued that you're very social. It's argued perform ritual. Just because you can have a minimum and that minimum be a collection of things doesn't necessarily mean that when you put those together for another concept, you're like ignoring or trying to cover up all the concepts in it, right? Depends on how you're taxonomizing it and how you're separating these out, because you can just separate out the individual components and then define them individually on their own terms as well. People do that all the time.
For example, are all tied together in one strange mystical/disciplinary package that must be protected from encroachment by other parts of society. In fact, for the vast majority of our time on this planet, humans have organized themselves differently than this. The separation of church and state, for example, only makes sense if you assume that church as a concept even makes sense. But what if there are other kinds of arrangements of things that are equally worthy, or perhaps even more worthy?
Yeah, but you're not calling into question the idea that church as a concept makes sense. You're calling into question whether you should call it by the name of religion. That's all you're saying. You're not saying, oh, there's something fundamentally amiss with this social institution, right? You're not saying that. What you're saying is, yeah, that social institution exists, but don't call it religion because that offends my fart sniffing sensibilities. So you're not like, you're just lying. You're just lying about the actual content of what you're saying.
You tell me to not drink and drive, but I tell you this. If the road were not invented, if there was no road, if none of you understood, if you and I didn't understand what the road was, would you care if I drunk and drove? I ask you that.
Look, there's the social construction of reality is a thing. So who cares if I like lop my neighbor's head off? Like, it doesn't matter, bro.
You may not want me to set off this C4 bomb in the middle of town square, but I ask you this. Did you know that there used to not be a town square?
Protected from encroachment by other parts of society than church? What if church itself encroaches upon more worthy configurations of human institutions and practice? Which leads to a final point that I didn't bring up in my video response to Andrew. Not only do categories like religion, if taken to refer to a real and universal aspect of human life, risk misleading us into believing that practices associated with religion are necessary to our well-being, and therefore may justify the use of authoritarian measures to maintain a space for religion in society.
But you're
or
not
to
questioning that. You're not questioning the practices. You're questioning that they're called religion. That's all you're doing. The only air quotes argument that you presented was that you shouldn't call such things religion because that's an arbitrary grouping and people didn't use that term before and yada 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 irrelevant nonsense, right? That's the argument. The argument is not that there's something wrong with the social practice of religion, right? Or that there's something wrong with the social practice of church, that there's something wrong with the belief systems that are involved, right? That would have been substantive. But instead, you're content to, essentially put forward substanceless, semantic, air quotes points rather than say something about the supposed phenomena, right? Like you're just lying about the content that you're actually putting forward here. You're like anybody who's paying attention to you talk can tell that you're putting on airs about exactly how much substance there is in what you're saying.
abuses that take place under the umbrella of religious rights because of the assumption that the place of religion in society must be protected from outside interference. More insidiously, when we take these categories like religion for granted,
More insidiously.
Well, Insidious Chapter 2 or Insidious Chapter 3?
Yeah. I don't understand people who are this unself-aware. Like, how do you not know that you're literally a stereotype? More
Oh, you have
insidiously
no
when you
idea.
consider that I spell my own farts. It's like, yeah, all right. I don't know, dude. Did you want to be like, have your headshot in the, the pictorial representation of the dictionary definition of pretentious? Was that the idea? Like,
He's pretentious maxing, I think is what the kids call it.
nah.
Oh, you didn't like that joke? I'll try harder next time.
You don't like a lot of my jokes, so I don't want to hear you complain.
that is, when we treat religion, nature, culture, and politics as real, separate, universal, and for all intents and purposes, permanent aspects of our life in this world, these categories have the potential to obscure other possible configurations of the things that they are assumed to contain.
Okay, can you
And
say
these-
something? Can you stop talking about the potential? Tell me what's actually the case, right? Yes, every concept has the potential to go awry and lead to bad stuff, right? Now, how about you stop talking about that irrelevant nonsense and tell me about the actual analytic import of the concept of religion? Because that's the thing that this video is ostensibly ostensibly about, right? It's ostensibly about religion being a bad concept, but instead of getting anything about that, what we're getting is, well, if you use the concept wrong, then potentially something bad could happen.
Yeah.
Yes. And could you say something?
I love this irony.
I don't care about the potential yada yada. The other thing, though, by the way, to flag is that to say that religion or politics or nature is real and to say that it is a universal, unchanging essence are two different things. Something can be real and not a universal, unchanging essence, right? Like the basic philosophical distinction there, right? So you should not be conflating those two. I think religion is real because I'm not a fucking head up my ass moron, right? But at the same time, I don't think it's a universal essence of human beings, right? So let's stop just sloppily mashing different points together as if they're the same point. And also, maybe let's say something of substance when you're done snipping your farts.
I love this irony of like people use the term religion to be vague and ambiguous and to cover things up. And then like in the next breath, I'm going to be vague and ambiguous and point to some sort of mysterious, scary threat that exists.
Well,
that
this
I
has the
don't even-
potential to be bad in some way that I'm not exactly going to describe.
Well, the impression from this video is like he's trying to like subtly nudge you to think about something. He's like, hey, there's like a scary elephant in the room, and he's trying to quietly get you to observe it without directly calling attention to it. It's like, there's a big, scary authoritarian with a tusk around a corner, you know?
These things can be very important to us. For instance, think about marriage.
No one has even bothered to define recognition. It seems to me that the whole point about recognition is that it is a recognition by the state of a territory controlled by somebody else and not by itself. This is not a matter of the state taking over marriage. It is a matter of the state recognizing that there exists in the country private life, not as a right handed down by the state, as in European conventions and UNHCR clauses, but as something which exists, a piece of ancient liberty which we possess, in which we conduct our private life. Destroy the permanency of marriage, and the church falls. Witness the enormous decline of the Church of England, the reason being the church is established upon the element of union in mankind. Break it, and you will have to go back to the overwhelming dominance of the state.
Perhaps the moral and social harmony that religious marriage rites are thought to grant to their adherents is equally obtainable through other sets of practices that otherwise seem completely unlike what we associate with religion. Maybe marriage rituals, for example, expensive weddings and so on, are not necessary for long and happy relationships. Maybe
Hey, cool. You can believe that, but Peter Hitchens believes that this kind of marriage organization as through the Christian church, and when the state recognizes that maintains a space for this religion, like he believes those are good things, right? It's not an argument against him to suggest, hey, there's other ways you can do marriage than the way you like. Did you know that?
Maybe you are wrong and I am right. Did you ever consider that?
Like, it's not like, it's one thing to say, okay, I think that if we got rid of church-sanctioned marriage, that didn't necessarily mean that the state would be encroaching. That would require, though, to put up your own values and your own beliefs instead of doing this weird navel-gazing where you're just like, but Mr. Hitchens, have you thought that there's non-Christian marriage in the world?
Yeah, well, also, the other thing is, like, like, the fact that he has completely sidestepped, like he's completely mistaken what his own point is, right? Like, Peter Hitchens is not arguing for the sanctity of marriage because he believes that, in the analytic usefulness of the concept of religion, right? If he didn't call the church a religious institution and he called it poo poo pee pee, he would be making the same fucking point, because his fucking point is not about, is the concept of religion academically useful? Which, by the way, President Sunday hasn't said anything about that either, really. He's pretended to talk about that, but he hasn't talked about that, as I've already sort of pointed out. Whatever. So, okay, the reason that he's saying we need to preserve marriage as an institution is because he's an ideological conservative. It is not because he hasn't read your book that points out that, before the concept of religion, people got along fine. Like, it's these two things have nothing fucking to do with each other whatsoever.
I mean, any intelligent conservative can say, okay, you have this specific configuration of the marriage ritual. Yes, there have been other versions of it, and yes, it didn't always exist. But I argue that this version of the ritual, in conjunction with all these other forces, helped to produce our unique society, and that we should reinforce them and maintain them as a way to bring stability as defined by maintaining certain values and ideals that I see as reinforced by this ritual. It means nothing when you say, but did you know there are things that are outside of what you said?
be covenants that force people into long-term sexual relationships when they are young against their will later on don't actually conduce to healthy relationships so much as make relationships a thing that people...
Stop talking about maybe. Say something. Fucking say something, for the love of God. I don't get, like, you're not going to win an argument with Peter Hitchens saying, well, maybe you're wrong. Maybe you're wrong. Did you ever think about that? There's a possibility that you're wrong. Because you didn't think he actually is wrong. So could you address that point instead of fucking snipping your own fucking anus?
That Key and Peele sketch, and the guy's like awkward, and then the other guy grabs.
Say something. Talk about something that you like.
People desperately desire to escape from as from a prison. What if long-lasting, healthy relationships are actually better attained through regular and depathologized counseling sessions and community involvement, along with a societal attitude toward work and leisure?
Fuck your counseling and fuck your community.
What if we get the community counselor to gaslight you into working more?
Yeah, fuck off. Actually, dude, fucking your, like, your little fucking village community where everybody has to go see the psychiatrist in order to sanction their relationships, that to me is worth about as much as, like, church sanctioned marriage. And basically that amount is exactly, zero, right? So, like, you fuck off.
I gotta be real. I don't care about getting recognition from the community therapist to get married or to do the random XY thing with somebody else. Like when it comes to like
Leftism is when the community controls stuff, bro. It's when the community like dictates your life, like so the church dictates your life in conservatism, and in leftism, the community dictates your life, bro.
I feel like the main person that when it comes to having relations with somebody else, the most important person in that is that other person and not like the community therapist. But hey, whatever.
Right? Isn't there somebody you forgot to ask?
Encourages rather than prohibits the kinds of communal activities that forge and help maintain bonds between people, as just one example, just a thought, at the risk of sounding trite.
Why is can I ask this question, right? Why is the thing that's like just assumed to be good maintaining social bonds? Why is that like an assumed good? Like, yeah, okay, if you have a society, right, there will be social bonds, right? And the breaking of social bonds can lead to the destruction of societies. But also, the destruction of societies is sometimes a good thing. Like, there are many societies in the history of this world that are terrible. Do we need to like increase the social bonds of like Nazi Germany? Is that the attitude that the anti-fascists should have been taking during the Second World War, to increase the social bonds in fascist Italy? Like, why? What is the actual rationale for any of this communitarian nonsense? Because it doesn't seem like the reason.
It's sort of a weirdly conservative argument to harp on about the importance of
Yeah, exactly.
social obligations and social customs via community enforced bonds and boundaries, and making sure the community is organically developing together under these conditions. But whatever.
Maybe that's the reason that Peter Hitchens loves church-sanctioned marriage so much.
God is love, then perhaps love is enough. All this to say, perhaps it's a bit more than just an academic quibble.
Nobody thinks love is enough, you fucking pretentious twit. Literally nobody on earth, including your fucking dumbass, thinks love is enough. You can love somebody while abusing them. That's a positive. In fact, that happens every day. You fucking shit-eating, fucking useless waste of space.
Yeah, limerence as a psychological concept is very scary when we, stalkers, obsession. There are people who fall in love and then somebody falls out of love and they want to leave. The other person doesn't want them to leave, and that results in all sorts of heinous things. So yeah, love is not enough. It's what you do with that love. That's whether or not it's enough.
Right.
Religion actually are, or if indeed they have any coherence whatsoever. I would prefer that going forward we take these categories, nature, religion, politics, etc., and take none of them for granted. Scrutinize them all equally. We have one life on this planet, both individually and collectively, and maybe basing how we treat each other.
I mean, you don't have to take a concept for granted to think that it's a good concept. Like, in other words, I think religion is a fine concept for making sense of a social phenomenon. I don't take it for granted, right? So, I mean, this is just more illustration of the fact that you're not actually saying anything, right? Like, you're just saying the only thing of quote, air quote, substance that could be gleaned from this video is, oh, you should think critically. Okay, thank you, Socrates, for letting us all know that. Okay, like, and do you have anything else to say? Oh, no, you don't. All right, good. I hope your followers, throw you that Patreon money for saying precisely fucking nothing.
President Sunday is like a fart balloon salesman.
And our environment on categories we received from people who didn't know their own history or the history of their own concepts isn't the best way to make the most of it. As always, thank you for listening, and take care.
I will not take care. I will do none of these things. All right.
Stop enabling content creators.
All right. Stop creaking your chair and dropping objects in front of the mic.
Oh my god.
All right. Well, Kenny from South Park, DJ Pone 3, and Steve Upside Down. All right. Last words, Pepper?
3 Steves in a row wearing tuxedos.
This is important. We're going to be putting out